Hello, welcome back to another edition of Hobby News Daily. I'm still Danny Black, but today I'm joined by Jesse Gibson from Sports Card Nonsense. What's up, Jesse?
Nothing much, Danny. I'm just kind of surprised that you asked me and not Mike to be on here. I'm kind of honored, and also I'm glad at the slight at Mike.
Well, you wouldn't stop calling, you wouldn't stop writing me letters. The money
That's fair.
became embarrassing at a certain point. I had to take you up on the offer.
You promised you weren't going to mention that part, but that's okay. We're here. We are. We're living in this world now. That's fine.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I slept. Um, for those who are not as aware, tell me about your deep, dark collecting background. All those years you grew up going through cards and sports games and all that.
Absolutely, yeah. So,
Any?
yeah, I actually do have a background, if you'll believe it or not, but I need to let the world know that that's not me. I'm not that guy.
That's what I'm clarifying. Yes.
So yeah, the shtick of me is more of like the entering the world, not just of cards, but of sports in general over the last few years since the hobby exploded. However, I did collect as a kid, like back in elementary school, up until like third grade. I was like a big Bulls fan. Like my dad was from Chicago, and we watched all of Jordan's games. We were watching the championship games. I remember like getting to stay up late, and that was like exciting times. And at that time in my life, I actually knew a little bit about what was going on in the world of sports, and
Okay.
I collected all Bulls players mainly, and of course Jordan. And I had a nice. I started collecting. I had a decent collection of Jordans. Granted, I never had like. I didn't even know that rookie cards were a thing and that they were important for me to chase. Like I didn't get the mechanics of it. I just knew I liked that guy or that team, and I wanted those cards for my collection. And so all I can remember is that I was in third grade, and a buddy of mine convinced me to trade all of my Jordans for what he called the wild cards. Like it's actually, I come to find out, wild card is still a thing. They're still making cards. There were all these no-name wild card basketball players, and he's like, they're going to be huge one day. You should trade me all of your Jordans because like
Oh,
he's like retiring, and you're not even going to care. And I was like, makes sense. He's my best friend. Why wouldn't I do that? So I still hold a grudge to this day, and that is how I got into sports cards, and then how I subsequently left sports cards until I was an adult.
first of all, totally logical. And you should not have ever spoken to that person again. So, um, very subtle, by the way, that you just happened to grow up with the greatest team in the history of basketball. I mean, way to take one, for the family and cheer on the greatest player ever.
Yeah, and Danny, before I get into anything else, I have to ask you: am I completely frozen on your side or no? Because on my side, everything is frozen. So
You are 100% moving normal on my side.
that's all I care about. I'm just going to leave it as is. I get to say that Bulls were my favorite team because my dad's from Chicago. Ergo, it's a mathematical equation that I'm not just a bandwagon guy. I went with my dad's team. So we
And
didn't
you
in
used
Nashville. We don't have a basketball team.
and
So
you used ergo, which makes it rock solid legally, I believe. Um,
vis-a-vis, of course.
right. So Tennessee, I hear from everybody who lives there that I am absolutely missing out on coming down and checking out. So before we get into everything else, I just want to. Are you pro Tennessee, or are we going
I
to get?
I am pro Tennessee. I am born and raised in Tennessee. I
This?
have never left. I've moved around a little bit within Middle Tennessee, but yeah, I am pro Tennessee, and I am pro everyone else not choosing Tennessee because at this point it's a broken record. If you know anything about what's going on, the explosion of real estate and all that in Middle Tennessee area, I want you to not ever like it. You can come visit. I will allow that, but don't move. You're fine wherever you are, I'm sure.
I'm in Baltimore, and you are welcome to move into my neighborhood. We'd love you to raise the real estate values and
Other
all that.
than the bridges, I hear it's great.
Ooh,
Too
Not too
soon.
soon.
I am so
It's not.
sorry.
It's not.
That
It's
is
not.
that is my fault that
No,
I let the
no,
intrusive thoughts win in that moment.
because I made the exact same joke 2 days ago, and I live in Baltimore, so it's okay. It's
And
like
it's not okay for I don't live there, and
it's okay.
therefore that's my bad.
I'm
Go ahead and
granting.
cut that.
Okay, we'll cut it on the non-edited version.
Yep.
So you and Mike Gio, and I'm not going to go beyond Gio in my pronunciations. Um, started with the shtick and the theory that he will expose you to the sports world as an adult and the collectible world, and you
Kind of,
somehow
yeah.
agreed to go on this journey.
Yeah, that was kind of the shtick that we came up with, right? When he quit breaking full time and sold his business because he started doing that for a while. It, he's family, so he married my cousin, so that's kind of how we got to know each other. And
Okay.
I'd already watched him go from like, he was a waiter at Chili's and he was like a painter, and that was like his gig, and it was fine. And then all of a sudden, like he's like selling sports cards online and he's making like crazy money. And I was just like, oh wow, I want to know more about what this is because it seems really interesting. And I always kind of had a little bit of an affinity to cards just from my childhood. And so I was like, all right, well, I start seeing how he's doing it and all this stuff, and he gets out of the business. And I'm like, dude, you've been really successful with that. Like, what do you want to do next? Because I want to be involved in it. Like, I want to do something in that space. Is there anything like you are looking at? And he said he wanted to do like a podcast of some sort. And there was another guy who was doing it with him at first for the first few episodes, and it just kind of didn't work out, scheduling and all that. So it was like, okay, well, what about this? Because I'm like producing the episodes and editing them for YouTube and putting them out on like podcast platforms. And it was like, well, what if? So you're not talking to yourself. I ask you questions all the time anyway. What if that was kind of the thing? I come on, I'm asking you questions, you're telling me, who is the same as everybody who's interested in cards, your audience, you're answering those questions for them and me. And we just kind of go from there. I learn as the audience learns. And that's kind of the birth of the podcast as we know it, of Sports Cards Nonsense. It started out with him kind of just talking about cards in general, the things he likes, dislikes, all that kind of thing. And it's morphed into, where we are today is it's still very much Mike talking about the things he likes and dislikes. And it's me, not only I've learned a lot, but now it's like my also additional growth of I like finding what I even like finding what was out there to like, and then knowing what I do, care about and don't care about. Plus, we have, interviews and getting many people in the hobby involved too. It's kind of just trying to open it up to the masses at large, not just the hobby guys.
And that was exactly going to be one of my questions. When you started feeling a little bit more comfortable in the vernacular and all the weird things that the hobby does, did you realize that you could pass this along to other people and kind of break that, maybe some of that? I don't know. I don't want to say fear, but make it more welcoming to people who maybe were curious about the space.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, the doing the podcast at first, I was very quiet. Like I didn't say a whole lot. I didn't add a whole lot to the podcast, and I'm sure if you ask Mike or some others, maybe I still don't. But I,
He just texted me right now, said the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I figured. Yeah, I thought so. I heard that ding. No, at first it was because of, like you said, I didn't know the vernacular. I didn't know, what a rookie versus a first card meant. I didn't know anything about like RPAs or top loading or all of the terms that we probably take for granted for guys who have been in the hobby for more than like a short while know by heart. This is stuff that is a barrier to entry to a lot of guys who like might care about it. They might know like, oh, I like cards of some kind, but I don't know anything that comes to the involvement of me, turning my card collection into maybe something of value or something that, would be desirable for someone else to have. All I know is I collected this one player or this one team, just like, the same case I was in when I was a young kid. So as I learned those things, it helped, I think, the audience to kind of grow and, realize, oh, it's okay to not know everything, to ask questions. And also it expanded our scope of, this isn't just for the guys who have been here forever, because that's what a lot of podcasts and a lot of just content in the space was, especially at that time, was if you knew it, then you'll enjoy it. If you didn't, there's not really, you're going to have a hard time paying attention and focusing on what they're saying. So yeah, it's kind of grown into now, even though I know a lot of terms, there'll still be times where I'm asking the questions because I realize, oh, I could probably either use a refresher on what that means, or there's probably new guys listening who still may not remember it, or, may need a refresher as well.
The hobby also never stops being boring or crazy, or maybe that's the same thing. So I think one of the things that is nice for you guys is it's hard to run out of material and questions and stuff going on. I know it's a challenge for anybody who does content creation to keep it fresh. So I'm not gonna in any way pretend it's not hard to keep it fresh. But the hobby gives us a little help every so often. Somebody buys somebody screws up something, the whole world freaks out, on social media, and we have a little content every so often. What is wrong with the people in the hobby?
What is wrong with the people in the hobby? Wait, so you really set that up in a way that I did not expect. My question was going to be, what's wrong with the people in the hobby? As far as like the stories that we get that create the news that might cause someone to see it and ask what's wrong with the hobby, I would say that anybody under a microscope is going to have issues, right? Like anybody who's put under a microscope would inevitably, you could find a flaw in the reasoning for what they did or something stupid. Now, granted, sometimes those you don't need as big of a microscope to see that. You can kind of see it a little more plain as day. But that's the thing when a lot of content creators start to lose. Either they either lose their ambition to really try and dig deep to find a good story, or to come up with a question or a piece of content that they think might stimulate their audience. Then yeah, they fall back on, all right, well, what would be easier would be for me to just search social media real quick and see what I could get angry at, or what I could make a big deal over that might not necessarily require that kind of stance if it weren't for the audience that I'm catering to. So yeah, I think that sometimes it's blown out of proportion strictly because they've got eyes on it and it gets views. And I think that is probably what's the biggest thing wrong with the hobby is the sensationalism. But it's not the hobby, right? That's everything. That's
true.
That's nightly news. That's every piece of media that we consume. The more salacious it is, the more entertained we are by it. But at the end of the day, if I can have a share in making a story that is maybe not, I don't take a story out of context and I just relay the facts, but maybe you find another spin that doesn't necessarily incite, a lot of negativity. I'm cool with that. If the story is a story because I have to like make a big scene about something that I don't think should be a big scene, or Mike doesn't, we'll typically try and stay away from that, or at least just maybe minorly cover it, because yeah, that's not really our thing. We don't want to promote that any more than the rest of the hobby already would.
And that's why I had you on today, because we're a very scandalous operation here at Hobby News Daily, and we go.
And that's why I agreed to come on, because I was actually, this is a gotcha moment. Guys, come on in. We got people coming in. They're inside your house right now. They're going to come in this room. We're ready to attack. So yeah.
Yeah, I've been cleaning and trimming and all sorts of stuff, and
yeah, we thought so.
Uh-huh. Actually, if you believe in it, it's okay. I'm not trying to start anything right after I call the hobby crazy. So, where are you now personally in your view of the hobby collecting? I know you've said you've come a long way and you can still use a refresher sometimes, but there's no way you've done this much work in the hobby without osmosis kicking in. So, are you at the point now you're comfortable pushing back at people or saying, I know they're wrong, or not that you say it out loud, but where do you feel personally?
So it depends on who I'm talking to, right? So if I'm talking to you or like a general audience or something, I feel pretty comfortable in it. It's when we are on the podcast, and it's specifically, I think it's like with Mike in general, because he has such like, it's a very intimidating level of knowledge that he has, but it's not just that, it's the authority in which he says it that can make me and I think others feel a little intimidated by it. And even though like today, it's like sometimes like I hear him talking, I'm like, I think he's done like a lot of research into this. I think he knows this really well. And there's other times where I hear him talking, I'm like, he's just making this up as he goes. And either way, though, I'm like, I'm trying not to just like call him out.
Wait, that's getting to know each other, which is awesome.
Yeah, exactly, 100%. And who knows? I could be wrong, 95% of the time. But that's just kind of like the sense that I think we both get. We can kind of tell when we're floundering and we're just kind of making it up on the spot, or if we actually really have a good understanding of that subject. And so when I'm talking about a subject matter, when it comes to cards specifically, sports cards specifically, I am more intimidated than probably any other topic when talking on the podcast to Mike about it. Like if I'm like looking to him for reaction, because I know he will not hold back when it comes to like calling me out for it. And thankfully, we've gotten a little bit better about like just trying to purposely embarrass the other person, because there have been times where it's like kind of felt a little bit like that. And it's been more of like, well, let's, maybe we can go back, we'll edit part of that out because like I said something stupid or completely off base that was not right. But at the same time, if it is, in a non, pressure's on, podcast is rolling moment, or just a casual conversation with a listener or just someone else, I find myself to be very confident in what I'm talking about, even sometimes when it does have to do with sports cards, because I know like someone didn't fact check everything that I was about to say. And that feels really good. Like, honestly, like I feel good knowing that I can like quote off, some of the best selling sports cards in history, or, even what the hot, bounties are out right now, talking about Connor Bedard being the chase. There's no chance I even would have known like any hockey player, let alone like the chase guy right now. And then like knowing about the Wimby 1-of-1 being hit, and like who like Tops or Panini's getting contracts from, and all these like different nuanced parts of the hobby, whether it's actual sports specific or, on the greater side, the news stories, the litigation, the collectability of this player versus that. All that stuff, like it does like through osmosis, whether I wanted it or not, it just kind of has seeped in as I've developed my appreciation for what I like in the hobby.
I've got a big grin on my face because that was like the terminology and the vernacular. Like you are fully down the well, my friend. You are whether or not you still believe you're on the outside with Mike. You're full card nerd. So
I that's the scariest thing anyone's ever told me, Danny. So I thank you, and I hate you. So
yeah, no, I get that all the time. And usually from my family. So I've been married 20 years. She's not surprised.
I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, you marry 20 women 1 year each. It makes it a lot easier.
Hey, I'm 16 years in, baby. So I get it. I'm getting close. So
good for you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Can I ask, is there any sharing of card professional life? You said Mike's married to your cousin. How that just dawned on me. How much does that all get intertwined?
Oh, wow. A lot, and yet not as much as you think. If that's
a
definite answer. That's so yeah, we are together, for the podcast each week. We're in the audio or studio together, but then we're together in so many other aspects of our lives. Like they're just intertangled with whether it's other pieces of our life that we may be a part of, other groups that we may be joining, or other family obligations or social groups that we're in. We are overlapping quite a bit because, again, like my cousin who he's married to he moved down here from Boston, and granted, he's made his own friends and his own little groups here and there, but for the most part, they're the same as a lot of the ones that I'm in. And so we are always doing something at some point during the week. There are, we have a text thread. We check in on each other. His wife is sick. They were over at our house last night. I was holding the baby. It's all that stuff. And so inevitably, during all these times that we're together, card stuff comes up, but it's honestly probably not as much as people would think, because I think Mike and I, we also kind of get like, there's this unspoken thing of like, let's save it, like save it for the show has become like a slogan for Mike and I both, like where we have a story or something like that. And it's like, all right, don't tell me live. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to be surprised. I want to be surprised by it. Let's wait till we're on air. And so it's like, while we may like point out like, hey, do you know anything about this or that? So like the other one's not caught off guard. A lot of it's just save it for the show. We'll talk about it when we're on air, because that way it helps to keep it fresh for the audience and for us, because we don't want to get burnt out. We don't want, I think anybody, fake it till you make it is a slogan I've lived by a lot of my life, but I don't want to provide a subpar product to the listener. And I think they can tell when you're phoning it in. And so if we can do our best to keep it fresh, that's one way we try to.
I can only imagine it's difficult to sound fresh with each other when you spend that much time together.
It can be, but it's funny how I would have thought we would have been like, we would not be able to successfully do it at this point, because we're going on, this is technically our 4th year of doing the podcast. And so doing it for this period of time, I would have thought we would have run out of things to talk about a long time ago, or run out of the enthusiasm to at least speak with any kind of like excitement. But fortunately, if you continue to invest in it, but you don't over-invest yourself in it, because Mike has talked about this on the pod, taking a step away from the hobby, even if it's like in short bursts, or like going and doing something else and not making that your complete focus. Honestly, it's a huge help for me to not have my entire life be, card centered. I recently picked up a hobby that has nothing to do with cards, and honestly, it helps me to better appreciate the time when I am with cards. So yeah, if I can recommend that to anybody who ever feels a little burnout, that would be one way to help.
Well, I think you speak a lot of truth. One of our writers, Mike Summer, wrote an article about a month ago about hobby burnout and stepping away. So it's not unique at all. And I think, it's okay to have more than one hobby. So
blasphemy! How dare you?
I know. I told you we're controversial here. So Hobby News Daily lands the plane on time. I promise you we would land on time, but I have one last question for you. What is your goal personally and professionally for the hobby? We just celebrated our 1-year anniversary. So on our 2nd anniversary, 1 year from now, what would you say would make it a good year?
Wait. What would make it a good year for you, or what's
for you personally and professionally?
For you, a year from now, a good goal for us would be, I would love to see us breaking the top. For this to make sense, there needs to be a little context. So a lot of goals I have are listenership related goals for the show. I want to expand to more and more people. And right now, this is information a lot of people can see. You don't have to like be on the inside to know this, but podcast listeners can see an idea for how many people listen to your podcast through a site called Chartable. It's a public site, and it gives an idea for how many people may listen to it in a certain category. So in the United States, under sports, where you've got things like, the Bill Simmons podcast and all the other Ringer podcasts, and then you've got like, Jason and Travis Kelce and all the other, the big sports podcasts out there. That is the category that Sports Cards Nonsense falls into, is sports. And so while there are other niche subcategories like hobby or leisure or something like that, we are under the sports category, which is a very big category. There's like, I think the estimate is somewhere roughly around 50,000 podcasts
That's all.
in that category. And our goal, I think a goal that I would have would be to consistently fall under 200, top 200 each week in that category. So like we sometimes will fall into the under top 200, but usually it's like 2 to 250 range, which honestly, falling into 2 to 250 out of like 50,000 sports podcasts feels
tremendous.
awesome. It's a great feeling, but I want to consistently make it better. And if I've got a year to continue to work on that, that would be my goal, is to fall under 200.
Well, you're obviously motivated, but I hope you feel validated by being where you are, because that's, for those that don't know, that's a real big deal to be in that top 250, or
It's
even
awesome.
300,
Yeah.
even 350. So congratulations. So we're going to help out the cause. Where can people find you at all platforms?
Absolutely. Well, basically anywhere you see Sports Cards Nonsense, as far as Instagram, X or Twitter, whatever, TikTok, these are YouTube. Sports Cards Nonsense are my main social media handles, but I also, like on Instagram, I'll also have one where it's sometimes less sports card related and just more nonsense related. I started one just called The Sports Boy, because my nickname is Sports Boy, kind of tongue in cheek on the pod. And then the Facebook group we're closing in on 200,000 members in that. Encourage anybody to come check out the Sports Cards Nonsense Facebook group. Mike and I are in there pretty often, but there's a lot of content that goes on in there. And then, yeah, our YouTube, even though, we can't post full episodes of the podcast on there, we will have clips and a lot of shorts that show up on there, and sometimes a little original content as well. So, yeah, check all those out, but mainly listen to the podcast on Spotify. They're kind of the bosses behind all of this. So, you can listen to it anywhere technically, but I would love you to listen to it on Spotify. So.
Right. If it happened to rhyme with Spotify.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right, Jesse. First of all, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. It was great getting to talk to you and getting to know you better, and for our audience to get introduced to you on the Hobby News Daily platform if they don't listen to you already. So thank you so much, and good luck to you and Mike moving forward.
Thanks for having me, Danny. Yeah, really appreciate it and wish you all the best. Hopefully get to talk to you again soon.
Yeah, no, we'll definitely have you back. And to everybody else, I don't do big exits. So thank you. And we'll see you next time on Hobby News Daily.